When people talk about history of professional wrestling, most fans immediately think about the WWF boom. Hulk Hogan, WrestleMania, and Vince McMahon Jr. taking professional wrestling or sports entertainment global. But none of that happens without a quiet, powerful territory that already had professional wrestling completely locked down decades earlier. Before the WWE, before the WWF, even before the WWWF, there was the Capitol Wrestling Corporation, a promotion that controlled New York, dominated the Northeast, and treated wrestling not like a carnival, but like a legitimate sport. Today on the History of Professional Wrestling, we're telling the story of Capitol Wrestling and the WWWF, or the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Because in reality, they're not two different companies. No, they're one continuous legacy that laid the foundation for basically everything that follows that we know today. Capitol Wrestling Corporation eventually became the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, or the WWWF, and later evolved into what we know as today, the WWE. But this story isn't about flashy gimmicks or over-the-top characters. This is a story about credibility, control, politics, and patience, and how one territory quietly became the most powerful force in professional wrestling history. Long before Capitol Wrestling officially existed, the Northeast Territory was already one of the most important wrestling regions in the country. New York City wasn't just another stop on the circuit, it was the market. Madison Square Garden was a sacred ground. If you wrestled there, it meant you were somebody. Wrestling fans in New York were smart, vocal, and demanding. They didn't want cartoonish wrestling. No, they didn't want any of that nonsense. They wanted something that felt real and something that they could connect with. The Northeast also had a dense ethnic community, Italian, Jewish, Irish, and Eastern European audiences, and wrestling promoters learned quickly how to present heroes the fans could connect with. This wasn't a territory where you can experiment wildly. This was a territory where you protected the business. Capitol Wrestling Corporation officially formed in 1953, but the groundwork was laid years earlier. At the center of it all, Jess McMahon. That's right, the great-grandfather of Vince McMahon. Jess McMahon wasn't just a wrestling promoter. He had strong ties to boxing, sports promotion, and even political connections in New York. He understood how to navigate powerful venues, unions, and media. Then you had Toots Mondt. Mondt was a former wrestler and one of the most important creative minds in wrestling history. Along with Ed Strangler Lewis and Billy Sando, I think I'm saying that right. If not, I'm sorry. Mondt helped pioneer the slam bang western style. I know that sounds crazy, but it was more faster paced, more exciting, and structured wrestling. Together, Jess McMahon and Toots Mondt created a promotion that emphasized believability, athletic presentation, and controlled booking. Capitol Wrestling wasn't flashy, it was professional. One of Capitol Wrestling's biggest advantages was television. While territories rushed to overexpose their product, Capitol used TV very, very carefully. Most of the shows were studio-based, simple sets, straightforward commentary, and competitive matches. The goal wasn't to give away big moments. It was to sell tickets. Major title changes and finishes were saved for Madison Square Garden and other key venues in the Northeast. This created trust with the audience. Fans believed what they saw, and when big matches were announced, they showed up. This philosophy protected the live gate, which is what when you go to professional wrestling and see it live, just for those who don't know. And it would define the promotion for decades. Like most major territories of the era, Capitol Wrestling was part of the National Wrestling Alliance. The NWA allowed promoters to share talent, recognize a single world's champion, and maintain order across the territories. Capitol Wrestling was one of the NWA's most powerful territories. due to its market size and influence. But there was always tension. Capital didn't like relying on champions they couldn't control. The Northeast was way too important to leave in someone else's hand. And eventually, everything came down to one man. That man was none other than Buddy Rogers. That's right, the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers was a megastar in the Northeast. He had the look, the charisma, and the confidence that New York fans absolutely loved. When Rogers became the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, Capitol Wrestling wanted to position him as a dominant figure in the region. The rest of the NWA, not so much. They were disputes over injuries, defenses, and control. Capitol Wrestling didn't want to risk losing momentum in their most valuable market. So, they made a historic decision, and a decision that will influence professional wrestling as a whole. They left the NWA, thus making them what we talked about last week, an outlaw territory. In 1963, Capitol Wrestling officially became the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. To explain the sudden creation of a new world championship, the fans were told that Buddy Rogers won a tournament in Rio de Janeiro. Yes, this example and saying will go on forever in wrestling history. If you look in the books, it's always a tournament in Rio de Janeiro. I mean, look at the Intercontinental title. Actually, yeah, it's weird. Whether the tournament actually happened or not wasn't the point. The point was simple. The WWWF now controlled its own champion. Buddy Rogers officially became the first WWWF World Heavyweight Champion, but the reign was never meant to last. Enter Bruno Sammartino. Bruno was everything that the WWWF needed. Legitimate strength, humble personality, immigrant background that resonated with fans, and absolute credibility. In 1963, Bruno defeated Buddy Rogers in just 48 seconds. What followed was one of the most important championship reigns in professional wrestling history. Bruno Sammartino held the WWWF title for over 7 years. Madison Square Garden sold out regularly. Wrestling wasn't just entertainment in New York, it was an event. Bruno didn't just carry the company, he basically was the company. Now, the WWWF booking style was conservative by design. Long title reigns, few challenges, clean finishes, clear heroes and villains. This wasn't a territory that hot-shotted titles, which means it bounced around from one to another. Championships actually meant something, and when a challenger stepped up, it felt very important. Challengers were also critical for heels. Baby faces were protected. Fans trusted the product, and that trust translated into loyalty. Now, Bruno was indeed the centerpiece of this company. The supporting cast mattered as well. Names like Gorilla Monsoon, Killer Kowalski, Freddie Blassie, before he became a manager, and Professor Toru Tanaka. I think I said that right. If not, let me know in the comments below. These men weren't just wrestlers. They were credible threats by design to make the champion feel larger than life. Every feud had a purpose. Every challenger had a reason. When Vince McMahon Sr. took full control, the philosophy stayed the same. He was cautious, traditional, and loyal to what worked. But the wrestling world itself was changing. Cable television was coming, the territory system was weakening, and a new generation was watching very closely. The foundation had been laid, and it was time for a change. Pro wrestling and the WWWF weren't just promotions, they were the blueprint. Without their focus on credibility, control, and long-term thinking, professional wrestling as we know it wouldn't exist at all. And that is just a brief history of Capitol Wrestling, or the WWWF. I want to thank you all for viewing this episode. This was something I thought was very interesting. Not many people know about the NWA and how there was a power struggle and all that, so it's pretty interesting. But let me know in the comments below what you all thought about this episode, or what you would like to see next on this series. Until next time, this is Joe Monroe signing off and saying good night.